right, well, welcome everyone to today's very special What's New in Tokyo release for Process Optimization Academy session. So some of you, like I was mentioning, could probably deliver these logistical slides, but I want to make sure I get them on the recording for first timers and people that are watching after the fact. So the purpose of these sessions are to help us all get better educated on ServiceNow's in-platform process mining capabilities. We'll provide how-tos, practical guidance and use cases, product updates like today's session. And as a group, we're just kind of get together, exchange ideas and collaborate so we all continually get better and improve when it comes to process mining in general. So how these sessions are going to work, we'll have a scheduled topic that we'll cover usually for the first 30 minutes. Today, we'll be diving into the enhancements being delivered in the Tokyo release. Then we'll open it up for questions on the chosen topic for that session. And then we'll open it up for questions above and beyond the day's topic for anything and everything that has to do with process optimization that you might be curious about. As these sections are going to be recorded and eventually posted on the community, so if that's a no-no for you guys at your company, consider yourself warned. And then finally, feel free to post your questions in the chat. Often during these sessions, we'll pause and ask for questions when it makes sense. Other times, as you guys that are repeat attendees have noticed, I'll ramble on for a bit and then go back and check the questions in the chat at the end. We do have some special guests here today that will help us answer those questions in the chat in real time, so be sure to use that. You're all going to be on mute, so if we do pause and ask for questions, make sure you unmute yourself, and I guarantee there's going to be times when you have a question and we don't have the answer for you immediately. In those sessions, we'll follow up and post them on the process optimization community, or maybe we'll use them as a future topic for a future session. And that's something that I would like you to ask. I mean, I've got now sessions planned out for the next 4 or 5, but if there is a topic that you want to cover, please go to the community and post it on the Process Optimization Academy page, so we get it into the list of things that we want to talk about in the future. You guys know this is the slide that says anything I say and do here today can't be held against me in the court of law. It's also the slide that says, as part of this conversation, if we make any forward-looking statements about what may be coming in future releases, you should take them as such, make no purchasing decisions based on them or decisions whatsoever based on them, because things are always subject to change. And I'm assuming that you've read the fine print. Now, I mentioned we have some special guests here today. Most of you know me, but I do have Manjeet Singh here with me today. Manjeet, do you want to just take a minute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Manjeet Singh. I'm with ServiceNow for about 7 years now. I lead our product management related work. Worked on the ITSM side for about 4 years, and more recently I'm focused on new product incubation, and this in-platform process mining came out of that effort. So really happy to be here partnering with you, Dan. Other than building product, I would say another passion I have is I love to stay fit physically, mentally, and I share a lot of things. If you go into my social handles, Twitter or anywhere, that's so you'll get how to build products and how to stay healthy. So back to you, Dan.
Perfect. Thanks, Manjeet. And Manjeet has been with our in-platform process mining solution from the very beginning. So I wanted to have him here today to kind of, help answer his questions, some questions you may have around why we added some capabilities and kind of how we got there, just in case those come up. Also, as Manjeet mentioned, if you follow him on Twitter, you will see product type content as well as fitness content. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see product type content as well as anti-fitness content. I typically post pictures about the things that I'm eating and drinking, which is not always fun for everyone to see. All right, so quick agenda for today. One, I'm going to do a quick 3 and 4 slide process mining refresher for those that are new, and then we'll dive into what's new in Tokyo. So we'll cover things like multi-dimensional models, expanded workflow support, some integrations that we've added with other capabilities on the platform. Some of you have probably heard about the finding rules component that is really powerful in process optimization. We've made a number of enhancements in there, and then we've adjusted the UI in some ways to kind of make it a little bit easier to use with some of the newer capabilities. We'll then answer any questions that you may have. We'll talk a little bit about how to get started, share some additional resources that are out there, and we'll talk a little bit about future sessions. All right, here's the quick refresher. So last time we did a bit of process mining 101, but for those new folks, with everything we do, there is a designed and desired path in our minds for how it should work and how things should play out, whether that be planning an event like these Academy sessions or a business process. And when you design things, you design for both efficiency as well as completeness to provide the best experience possible for everyone involved. Unfortunately, what we design isn't always what ends up happening in reality. So what in-platform process mining or process optimization allows us to do is use the audit log data that is generated as records move through a given workflow on the ServiceNow platform. We use that data to create a visual representation of what is actually happening within your given process to show you your truth, your reality. And this new level of visibility helps us accelerate our ability to identify inefficiencies and improvement opportunities. So process mining gives us the ability to answer process questions that we've historically had. We've always had a lot of questions that sometimes have been a little bit more challenging to answer. So if we look at where traditional analytics will allow us to answer a lot of the what type of questions about our processes, like, hey, what type of tickets, how many, how long did it take? Process mining starts to help us answer the whys. So things like, where is our process stuck? Where is the rework happening? Where are the tickets ping-ponging back and forth between groups? Where aren't we conforming to the process that we designed? All things that have historically been difficult to answer and then act upon are now available to us in a couple of clicks with process optimization. We like to say that process optimization is going to get you to the why behind all of those KPIs that you set up for a given process. So that's the quick refresher. Now let's dive into the what's new in Tokyo. So you may or may not know that process optimization was initially released in the Quebec timeframe, the Quebec release. And just in this span of 4 releases, look at all the significant enhancements that we've made to the product, right? And Tokyo is no different, right? We've added a slew of new capabilities and enhancements to the product in this release. Now, when we focus on Tokyo, I like to say there's a big 3 when it comes to capabilities, and then a number of other enhancements that we'll dive into individually. But the big 3 are multi-dimensional mining, and this allows us to get an end-to-end view of an entire workflow by visualizing the interconnected processes. Then we've added support for 2 additional workflows. So HR, we've added support for, as well as creator or applications that you've built with App Engine. Because what we're trying to do is continue to expand our coverage with the goal of allowing you to mine all workflows running on the platform. Right? And when we add a workflow, that includes content in the form of content packs. So we'll be coming out and we'll talk about it with a content pack for HR. When we start talking about creator workflows and custom applications that you've also on the platform, it becomes a little bit more difficult to provide you pre-built content packs, but we're looking at opportunities on how we can do that for you. And then the last big piece is we've got a pre-built integration with workforce optimization to start giving support team managers or desk managers visibility into their team's performance at a process level. So let's talk about multidimensional mining. So why did we add this? Many of the workflows that you have are a series of interconnected processes. So the one that most people kind of think of is, let's say, HR onboarding, or maybe a service catalog request where you've got kind of the request at the top, then the requested item, and then the tasks, right? There's an interconnectivity between kind of how the work gets done. So prior to Tokyo, you had some, but I'd say a little bit limited flexibility, and maybe had to pick and choose which portion of the workflow you wanted to focus in on. Now you can kind of build out the entire workflow and visualize all the interconnected process. Now, I say that, and this is one of those areas you're going to be able to pick your analogy or quote, right? You know, with great power comes great responsibility, or just because you can doesn't mean that you should, type of thing. Certainly there's a lot of power here. And for certain use cases, you're going to want to build out these interconnected multidimensional maps. But what I would say is I'd recommend taking crawl, walk, run scenario. Don't dive right into the deep end. For many situations, just because you can build out the whole map, you're really focusing on looking for an inefficiency within one specific area of a process, maybe, and your persona that you might be servicing is maybe only focused on one specific area. So in order to kind of help that target audience get the most out of it, you might want to focus in still on just, like, say, incident, rather than linking incident to problem to major incident or change or something like that. So you have this flexibility, and for certain use cases, you're going to be able to use it and take advantage of it. But I wouldn't say start with the biggest model possible. Start small and grow into these types of things. Now, so here's kind of that single process view that we had in San Diego release, and now in the Tokyo release, you can see some of the UI changes that we've made, but also the ability to start linking processes together. Some common examples, I think the most common one in which we might start linking things together, or you might start linking things together, is request management, right? Where you've got your request as the parent table, then your requested item, which would be a child of that parent, a child of that request, and then your SE task, right? And so you can start building out a flow, and we'll go into the instance and look at this live, but and kind of configure this one specifically, but just so you can start seeing some of the changes that you'll get when you start configuring your projects now, is you've got that table configuration in which you set up these parent-child or reference relationships. Another example would be that incident problem change piece, where you've got your incident as the parent, and then you've got two reference fields that link off of it, your problem and your change request. And there's two different types of kind of linkages that you can do, the parent-child type and the reference type, and how you make the decision based on how you're going to link those things together, whether it's a parent-child or a references. If you think about the form, is it something that you're selecting and putting in via one of those magnifying glass fields, or is it something that you're going to see in a related list? If it's a magnifying glass, it's typically going to be a reference linkage. If it's a related list, it's typically going to be a parent-child relationship. And then the last example, and this is kind of doubles on two new enhancements. One is this new multidimensional mining, but also the expansion into the HR piece. So now if you look at from an HR onboarding perspective, you might have your parent lifecycle event or case, and then we can start linking some of the child tasks that are involved in that lifecycle to this record to get that complete view. All right, let's pop over to the instance, and maybe we'll configure that request one. So come over here. I probably talked too long, but I'm just going to log into this instance. And we'll configure that request process. So admin. When I get to this projects page, I will point out, because I may forget a little bit later on, I mentioned some of the UI enhancements. You'll notice here that we've got these 3 tabs of now my projects shared with me in all. Prior to Tokyo, it was just one big section of all our projects there. You can organize them a little bit better. And I do also have this ability to search now for projects inside of here. Let's create a new one. And we'll come in here and we'll just call this one Academy Request. Great, we'll save it. And then we'll come down here and you'll notice some of the changes to the project creation form. So I've got my table configuration tab here, and we'll just say new, and we'll add our first table. And this will be the request table. We'll come in here, we'll get our request. And I'm going to leave some filtering off because I don't have a ton of data in here. So I only have 160 records. Typically, right, as we've talked about in the past, you want to do this on closed work. So when you start doing your analysis, I don't have a ton of records from a demo perspective. So I'm going to leave this as is right now. And then what we're going to do, now that I've got this is my parent table, I need to add my activity definition, right? Because every single table that we want to add needs to have at least one activity definition. I'm going to add state. And then you'll notice I've got this display name field here. There's a lot more flexibility in terms of labeling things when you're building out your models now, especially since we've got this cross model or interconnected model piece. So, oops, I typed that wrong, but you guys get the idea. Now that I've got this, if I go back to my project definition, I can come in here and I can start adding additional table configurations. So let's add that requested item piece. So we'll say requested item. The table is going to be my requested item, I think. And it is, what is that? I know it's underneath here, SC. Let's just say request, right? What is that one called? Requested item. I thought I got it right. Again, I have limited data, so I'm not going to add any filter criteria in this case, but now I've got my relationship piece. Is this a reference or a child? And again, if we think back to the rule, if it's a magnifying glass, I'm probably going to have a reference. If it's a related list, I'm going to have my child, and I'm going to choose my table. It's only going to show me the ones that are in this model. So I've got my request, and then what is going to be the reference field? I can either use parent or request. In this case, I'm going to say request and hit OK and save this. I got to add my activity definition for this table. We'll say state. And we can say this is requested. We'll say this is item state. Great. Submit that. And then we'll add the last table configuration, which will be my, go back to the project definition, which will be my SC catalog tasks. Boom. We'll call it tasks. Tasks. Relationship again is going to be child. In this case, the parent table is going to be that requested item. And the reference field is going to be my requested item. And we'll say submit. I would add my activity, which you've already seen me do. I'm going to do a cooking show piece here and just kind of show you now what we would, this is what it would look like. I would hit the generate model piece and we get our model. I'm going to go back here though to my workspace and just look at, I have a finished one here, just kind of show you what this would look like. Request management process, open it up into my workbench. And now I've got the linkages. So I've got my requests, I've got my items, whoops. And then I've got my catalog task piece. And I can start expanding these tables, opening them up, look at the linkages between them, just some of the pieces to call out here. And this is in some enhancements, but in the piece here, you notice that we've kind of cleaned this up a little bit, where we've taken some of the content that was over here on the left-hand side of the screen in terms of your model statistics, your bottleneck analysis. We packaged them up over here on the right-hand side of the screen to give you a little bit more real estate. I've got my bottleneck analysis there. And now I can look at the bottleneck analysis for across the different processes that we've mined here. So my requested item, and my tasks. I've also got the ability here to say, hey, we've seen this in the past where we start expanding the number of connections within a given process, but now I can swap between the different processes and get their statistics as well as swap controlling their connections and activities. And then the last thing on this interconnected or multidimensional mining piece is you'll notice this 80% here. What this is saying to me is that, well, I should mess over it a little bit better. Right now, 80% of the transitions are hidden. So I'm only showing 20% of the connections between these two tables. And I have that ability to kind of control how many of the connections between the processes that I'm saying right here. So lots of power, right? You see a lot more, you get the complete visibility into this process now, but as you can tell, the map becomes a little bit more involved. And if you think about your use cases and what inefficiencies you're trying to identify, in some cases, it might be make more sense to keep it simple with just one single process here. But now know that you do have the flexibility for more advanced analysis if you wanted to start linking things together. All right. Next capability that we're talking about here. This one here, just expanded workflow support. So what we've got here, I just kind of talked about up until now, you you had the ability to get entitlements for process optimization for ITSM and customer service. In Tokyo, we've expanded that entitlement coverage to include HR and creative workflows. So I talked about this a little bit before, but when we add a workflow, we're talking about the entitlement to run the mining against tables covered underneath that workflow, plus content packs. And those content packs include things like our common finding and inefficiencies cards, or the finding rules. So it gives you that head start when you're starting to mine a traditional workflow. And again, our goal here when we talk about workflow support is to make sure that you can start mining and using process optimization against all workflows that are running on the platform. So with workforce optimization integration, I don't know how many of you are familiar with workforce optimization, but what we're doing here is trying to provide that support manager visibility and understanding on how their teams are working at the process level. So why we added this is because insights are most valuable when they're in the flow of the day-to-day lives of people and the people that need to act on them, right? So team leads and service desk managers will now have process visibility right within their own specific workspace. Specifically, we've embedded the finding cards, or those process insights, right there in the workspace, root cause analysis and variation analysis for the work that touches their team. So they could be using their workspace and kind of having mining run behind the scenes. And when they get to that workspace, they're going to see inefficiencies in the process pop right out to them. So it's a huge advantage. And especially, you'll see this more and more where we're trying to take these analytical capabilities on the platform and embed them in the persona-based workspaces that are out there. Oh, I should mention on this workforce optimization one, we're going to have on the schedule now, we have a separate session where the workforce optimization team is going to come on, and it's in a couple of weeks to talk specifically about this integration between workforce and process optimization and how to configure it, if you're interested in that topic. Now, let's talk about enhancements to the finding rules. So with most workflows, there are likely to be common sets of inefficiencies and bottlenecks, and finding rules help process owners or analysts by identifying records that match these patterns and then guide them to improvement opportunities. So for most of you, you probably have a hypothesis about problem areas within a specific process that you can use these cards to help confirm those hypotheses and isolate the records that match that. I like to equate this to when I was a kid playing hide and seek at my house with my friends. I sort of knew, right? You knew you were on your home turf. You knew the 3 or 4 go-to hiding spots, which made it really easy when I was the seeker. I was much more efficient at finding my friends than they were at finding me when I was on my home turf. I think that these finding cards sort of are like that, right? You know your process, you know some of the efficiencies that you think are inside of them. You can use finding cards to help make it, to kind of grease the skids and help you find opportunities to improve more quickly, or prove out that those opportunities to improve exist. And then these finding rules are also useful when you want to highlight specific non-conformant activities. So if you start looking at some of the ones on the screen here, things like records that take longer than 7 days to go from closed to or resolved to closed, or multi-hop issues, or things that are going directly to resolved and closed. Those are process issues that we should be addressing, or non-conformant things that we should be calling out. Now, we package some of these preset rules up into content packs. So for example, with ITSM, there's about 13 of these, but you have the ability to adjust the 13 that we package in those content packs and also configure your own. In Tokyo, what we've done is we've added 3 main enhancements to these finding rules. First, we've now given you the flexibility to add rules at the project level, not just at the process level. So for example, in San Diego, all the rules for a given table, let's take incident, they'd be applied across all of the projects that were run against or created against that table. And you're still going to have that ability to create kind of those table level finding rules, but now you have the flexibility, or individual analysts have the flexibility, or process owners have the flexibility to create their own project level rules. So they'll inherit the ones that are at the table level, but then they can create specific ones for their analysis that not everybody else needs. So that's improvement number 1, or enhancement number 1 when it comes to these finding rules. Then we've added the ability to create custom start and stop conditions. So there may be scenarios where you want to analyze an isolated portion of the workflow. So, you can isolate the data that you want to analyze, but you also might want to start isolating, when you're talking about data, like you might just want to focus in on a certain category of tickets. You totally can do that at the project level. But now you can also start saying, I want to create a custom start and stop definition. So many customers ask to have the ability to just analyze workflow up to the resolve state and not include that closed transition. Because some of them were seeing, like, they were looking at the numbers and like, well, we don't really analyze the data this way. We kind of just go to resolution, and that's what we want. So this helped keep their numbers in line with some of the KPIs that they were tracking in other places in the organization. So these custom start and stop definitions. And then finally, we added some more flexibility to how you define the rules to account for some more of the complex use cases that you might come up against. All right, so let's go over to the instance and take a look at kind of what these might look like. So not this instance, but in here. And I'm assuming again that I've got logged out, but I've got this one example, enhanced finding rules with start and stop. So I'm going to open that up. Oh, I thought so. I thought I'd need to log back in. And while I do this, Manjeet, I don't know if you're monitoring the questions. I see the little red chat. Are there any questions that we should address, or we can address out loud here?
No, we are good. I think Caroline has one question, and Caroline, let me know if you have any follow-up. I put a response to your questions.
Yeah, I think what you put in is part of it. I think what I am thinking mostly about is that sometimes you might have a reference to the same record twice. So like on requested item, you can reference the request via the parent or the request field, or like on incident, you can reference a parent incident either via the parent or the parent incident field. And I just wanted to confirm that it's better to select the one that actually references the like the incident or the request table rather than going through the generic parent reference.
Yeah, I think that'll be better. But both options are supported. You can include either. I mean, for a given table, you will only have one type of selections, either the child relationship or the reference relationship.
Okay.
So, Manjeet, can you clarify for the people that might be listening to this recording after the fact? I don't think the questions follow. So, Carlene's question was, when multiple references to the same record are available to the parent and request, you should probably choose the more specific field, correct? And you said, yes, you should choose the more specific field. And so when choosing the request, because the request it is an SC request specific reference in the parent, that's a general task reference. I just wanted to clarify that for the recording. And you responded that when you have one record linking to multiple references, then you will select a reference field in the tables.
So Tricia, I need to look at the request management example specific, because I thought we only have the parent and child. But let me answer it this way. So there are three types of relationships we have in the platform. There's a reference relationship, there is a child, and then we have a more kind of one-to-many or many-to-many, like universal request. So all three types are supported that exist at the data and table level. Now, I think which one will really be useful for request management? I think the best would be look at the data and what analysis you want to do.
And I think that this question is actually one level deeper than the type, like the parent versus child or many to many. When Dan was setting up, once he got past that, when he was setting up, so now I know that SE request is a child of, request item is a child of request.
Right.
What field in the database do I use to link those tables? He had the option to choose either the parent field or the request field that both exist on the requested item. And so that's where I was just trying to say, like, picking the more specific reference will probably get you better
Correct.
access to different data in different forms.
Correct. And that's the one of the, you're actually bringing up a really good topic. And it's something we'll cover in a future session too, in terms of kind of setting up best practices for setting up, let's say, a center of excellence, or kind of rolling out process mining in an organization. Is that process mining is, as my friend Jeroen likes to say, it's a 2 to tango type of scenario, right? It's going to require somebody with the knowledge of the process itself, but then also somebody that understands a little bit of ServiceNow to be involved in kind of configuring these in some cases to kind of make the decision that you're talking about, Carlene, like which field are we actually using, and which one has the value that we want to kind of get to the end goal. So it's a joint effort in some cases to kind of be successful with a given process mining project. Now, just coming back to this piece here, in terms of some of the enhancements that we've made at the finding rules level. First and foremost, you've kind of seen the screen already, but you'll notice I'm looking at a project that we created around incident. And we've got the process level finding card. So these are the ones that are going to run against every single project we mine against the incident table. And these happen to be the 13 that we provide out of the box. But you now have the option at the project level to create additional finding rules just for this specific project that you're mining. In this case here, we've created this rule around tier 1 ping ponging analysis, and I can open this one up just so you can see what this might look like and some of the configuration that are inside of this scenario. So in this case here, I want my start condition for doing this exercise or subsetting the data to be when first assigned to tier 1. And then eventually, if that incident or ticket ever comes back and is reassigned back to tier 1, I want to capture those records that take that path, that meet that criteria. Right? So it's kind of going from tier 1 and then back to somewhere else and then back to tier 1 at some point. I have the ability to track the duration and see how long. Maybe I want to put like a 7-day thing. Hey, if this happens and it's greater than 7 days, I want to know about it. Or if it's less than 7 days, I want to know about it. And then I've got some additional kind of filter criteria that I can put on this and saying, well, does it have the same group, or it has a different group, or is performed by the same user? So there's a lot of flexibility inside of these finding rules to create scenarios to see if things are conforming to your process, or to test hypotheses about things that might be happening inside of your processes. And again, there's lots of stuff in there that I'm interested to hear. Right? One of the things that I would ask is if you guys have specific use cases or things about your processes or hypotheses that you want to test, maybe you go to the Academy page and kind of share them there, so we can create a session around, let's say, five of these finding rules that we want to create on a future session, because I think there's a lot of uniqueness out there, but there's also a lot of consistency, and we want to get a better understanding of the types of things that people want to use these finding rules for. All right, let me go back in there. I do want to show the custom start and stop condition as well. So let's come in here, we'll edit this. And then now at the table level here, when I go to configure a table, on my parent table for any sort of mining that I'm doing, I've got this ability to create custom start and stop conditions underneath this advanced conditions option. So you can see here my process start condition. So I just wanted to start right when the process is created, but then I've created a custom stop condition here. So that I've created a rule that says, hey, I want to stop this right when the state is resolved, and that's going to be the last one only. And again, you can create different conditions and rules for this criterion here. I just kept it simple for this one in terms of the state being resolved. So there might be a closed hop in here. I'm going to eliminate that from this mining. So if I come back and I look at this, I'm going to open up 2 projects. I've got one in which I had that stop and start rule of stop at resolved, and I'll open that one up here inside of the analyst workbench. And if I expand this out, you'll notice here the data is going to flow through, and it's going to come down here and end at the resolve state. If I opened up this other project here where I've got no custom start and stop, same data that I mined on the incident table, but this one now is going to flow all the way through from resolved until closed because it doesn't have that custom stop date, stop activity inside of there. So just a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you configure the data that you want to mine than you had before in just the filter criteria that you set up at the, I would say at the table level. You now have the ability to set up some criteria at the individual transition and route level when you do some mining. All right, let's come back over here. Some additional capabilities we added. So one of the benefits of being an in-platform solution is that we're able to build in more closed loop capabilities when we start thinking about process optimization in general. So prior to Tokyo, we had a pre-built integration with continual improvement application to allow users to create or link to a continual improvement initiative right from the analyst workbench itself. Now in Tokyo, with the introduction of something we call Automation Center, which is going to kind of give you that overview of all of the different automations that you have running on the platform. We've got the ability to create an automation idea right from the workspace when you're doing some analysis and the automation opportunity presents itself. So two different types of ways to track improvements that you want to make inside of the organization. You may be using continual improvement management. You may be using Automation Center. You may be using both. Regardless, you now have a way to kind of take that next step, right? I always like to say too often when it comes to analytics, people do a bunch of analysis, they find an insight, they go to lunch and tell their friend about the insight that they found, and then that insight disappears into the ether, and most often it doesn't get acted upon. These integrations right inside of the workspace allows you to immediately create some sort of record on the platform to ensure that insight and potential improvement doesn't get lost. It gets tracked and at least logged in some way, and then potentially tracked depending on how mature you are from an organizational perspective and following up on these things. We've made a number of other enhancements to the user interface, some that I've already kind of shown you, just to create a better overall experience when you start doing your discovery inside of the maps themselves. One important one that I'll show you, and the team is pretty proud of, is this ability to we added a histogram on the process map arcs that are there. So now you can start seeing some of the distribution of the data. So if you'll see this in a second, but let's, in between a transition, we had, let's say, the average duration it would take. But as you know, with the average duration, it's an average. So this histogram is going to show you kind of the distribution of time. So you can see where kind of most of the records fall in terms of their total duration for that one specific arc. It just gives you another layer of visibility. Some of you that have been playing around with this, you probably remember in San Diego, you had to check a box that said include the create audit event. So when a record gets created, we wanted to make sure you captured the information at the initial point of creation. You no longer have to add that. We're automatically creating that. We've improved the workbench experience. I showed you some of those. We'll go back in and just look at a few more things inside of there. And then we've added a little bit more flexibility when it comes to scheduling some of these mining activities. If we haven't talked about it in the past, you do have the ability to schedule minings, which is important if you think about this. You do mining to identify inefficiencies, but this is a continual exercise, right? Once you make an improvement, you should still be coming back to the process and using the maps again to see if the improvement is having an impact, and then kind of how things are performing or where the next improvement opportunity is after you make that improvement. All right, so let's go to the instance and just look at some of these improvements from a UI perspective. I already touched on some of them. Hopefully I'm still logged into this one here. Let's bring up, I talked about this improvement here with the My Projects, the shared and all. If I come over here and let's just find incidents, here we go. We'll open this one up. And then inside of here, if I open up the map, we'll look at a few things. I probably should have opened up an incident problem change one to show that. Come on, project. Here we go. Perfect. I talked a little bit about these capabilities here, so that the model statistics, they used to be in a box over here. We've now packaged them up over here on the right-hand side of the screen, so we can kind of give you more real estate on the map itself. I've got my bottleneck analysis, as you saw before. Inside of here, I've got my ability to filter by different types of overall transitions. This is new. I also have the ability to include the start and stop transitions inside of here if I want to, or hide those, which is new. And that's the ability to search across this is also new inside of the bottleneck analysis itself. Those global metrics, so we've now automatically applied a secondary metric. If you remember in San Diego or prior, you had the ability to say which metrics you want to look at on the transitions on the map. They used to be up here. We've now packaged them on the right-hand side of the screen, and we've automatically applied the secondary metric on side over here. That linkage with Automation Center is right over here on the right-hand side. So the same place you would come to add your continual improvement initiative, you now have this ability to add an automation idea to Automation Center right here on the right-hand side of the screen. If I come on to any one of the transitions, actually, I'll show this piece. Notice when I click on any one of the activities now, all the paths that run through that activity, they light up, kind of so a little thing, but kind of helps the readability of the map when we do that. And then if I click on any one of the arcs here, I'll just hide this, click on any one of the arcs, you'll notice now I've got, it pops out on the right-hand side of the screen. It used to be a big box that covered the map. No longer is that the case. It pops out from the right-hand side of the screen, again, making the map a little bit more readable. But I now have this histogram piece to help show me the distribution of the data within that arc itself. So if I come here, I've got the distribution, so I can start seeing, all right, the average here is 3 days for this awaiting caller info loop that we're looking at inside of the data. But I can see that the majority of the records are falling into that, but I do have some outliers here, 22 records that are 1 week to 2 weeks, and then 5 weeks. And I believe the way that we set this up is it's going to give you 10 buckets of data by default at the maximum. And then if there's a smaller group, it shrinks down from the 10. Two more things inside of here. One is this little box down here. You may be familiar with this and other things that other tools that you use on the internet, but I have this ability to kind of control the zooming now. And when you start getting into those multi-dimensional maps, it could get a little involved, so you can navigate around that way. And then on the variation analysis side of the house, little thing that we've done is you have this ability now as you map over the different variants or routes that things are taking, you'll notice that little pop-up at the bottom of the screen that'll kind of show you the different activities within the route and then highlight it on the map as well. So little thing from a usability perspective, but is kind of helpful in terms of doing your analysis and identifying opportunities. Manjeet, is there anything from a UI perspective that I left out here? I think I covered most of them, but there was a number of the UI enhancements. I shouldn't say little, but the UI enhancements, and I think I got most of them though. Anything that's glaring that I left out?
No, I mean, there are a bunch of small things. Like if you go back to the summary and insight, or even the main landing page, Dan, now you can short your card based on the last mine and then, the main landing page for the workbench.
Oh, got it.
That was another common ask we saw from customers, like, hey, I have these, multiple versions of the model. Can I sort them by which one was the, some of these stats that you see here?
Got it.
And I don't know if you go back to your PowerPoint for a second, where you had the list of other enhancement, if anything worth showing.
Yeah, we touched on a little, so just some of the labeling, right? The ability to put more descriptive labels on some things, having a little bit of control there. That's something that we added. But I think we got to most of these things today during the session. So we went to the instance. So I guess now would be a good time to just open it up to questions. I mean, there's a lot there. We'll probably wind up doing individual Academy sessions on certain areas. Like I said, I will probably do a session just on interpreting and reading the multidimensional map. I think is a session that I put out there because it can get pretty involved, and there's probably some best practices that we could talk about in terms of how to use those interconnected maps and read them. And the next session, actually, in 2 weeks, we'll focus in and spend the entire time on just those finding rules. And how to configure those finding rules. And if you've got, again, use cases that you think would be interesting to cover, please go to the Academy page kind of put those use cases in there. So we have some guidance. I'll come up with 3 or 4, but I'd love them to be specific to things that you guys are interested in seeing and hearing. All right, so any questions about any of the content that we covered here today? Any feedback, any thoughts on anything?
Dan, there's one question by Philip in the chat.
Phil, do you want to come off mute and ask, or you want me to read it?
Of course, there's a question.
Head of the class.
Basically, I was asking that, you guys have a new model where you're charging for storage of data that's in the instance. And I was just curious if the data that's accumulated by PO is part of that licensing model, or is it excluded?
I'm not overly familiar. I'll have to get back to you on that one. To my knowledge, the answer is no, but I've not been asked that before, so I don't know the answer to that one off the top of my head, but I will get it and get back to you for sure.
Yeah, and what we mean by application usage license limit here is like how many times that.
Well, it may be specific to CMDB, but as databases grow large, there are now licensing issues that get applied to how much data lives in some of those tables. And so I didn't know if the tables that are used for PO fall into that same, rule set from a licensing standpoint. Because if data starts to grow, I mean, if you've done any work in analytics, you know that you can get really large data sets out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if that would be part of that licensing model or whether it's excluded.
I would say, based on that clarification, the answer is 99.9%.
It is actually 100% no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason, Philip, is the way PO works is for a given model, we extract only the specified data set, and we keep it into a PO table. And right now, out of the box, we only keep 5 snapshots, and we continue to kind of clean up the old ones. So
you don't have long-term trending anyway then?
No, I mean, there's the default recommendation is the last 5 minings.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That probably takes care of that then.
Correct. Yeah.
Any
So I have a
other-
different
Yeah.
question, Dan.
Perfect.
Is there any thought or consideration in including the 95th percentile as part of the population calculation?
95th, and help me understand a little bit better the kind of.
Oh, what the 95th percentile is?
Yes.
That could probably be a different discussion, but I'll shoot you an email about it when you talk about it.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. Anything? Send me an email about the use case. Anything else? Anything else out there? All right. If there's no additional questions. So for those of you that have not been here before, I have to imagine some of you have already seen this and have done these things, but there is if you like what you saw here today, there is a process optimizations essentials course on the Now Learning site. It takes about 90 minutes to go through. If you plan on using the solution, highly recommend that you go through that process optimizations essentials course. And then the next piece is just activate the plugins. You all have the right to activate the plugins in a subprod instance and mine up to 4,000 records. So the plugins that you would be activating for most of you, for all of you, it would be the process optimization plugin, and then the content pack for your associated products. So it's ITSM or CSM, or if you're using FSO or Telco, there's 4 content packs out there today from a San Diego perspective. And obviously, as Tokyo gets added, there'll be content packs for HR that are out there as well. Some additional resources. Most of you have probably found this link through the community site, but there is a process optimization community forum. Please post your questions there. Go there and kind of post things, some of the things that we asked for feedback on here today in terms of scenarios that you might be wanting to use finding rules for, or suggestions for future topics. Please go post them there in the community. There's a community FAQ article posted up there that basically acts as an index to all of the other content that we've been posting, sharing, recording, like these sessions. That FAQ has most of it all packaged up inside of there. We've kind of done these. I talked about that Now Learning site already. And then there is one article out there that has a link to an overview presentation and demonstration. So if you're saying to yourself, hey, there's somebody else inside of my organization that I would love to see process optimization in action, there's a link that you can send them that has a recorded demo so they could see it, or a recorded overview presentation. So very helpful resources that are out there. In terms of what's up next from a Process Optimization Academy session, here's the current schedule of what we've got planned. Obviously, if you go there and you post some ideas, maybe we can change this a little bit. But on our next session, like I said, we're really going to dive into those finding rules and how we potentially could use them. I really think those are where a lot of the power of the solution lie. And it really helps us kind of think about the questions that we have about our processes that we want to answer, and then pre-configure getting the answers to those questions. And then after that, we'll talk, the next session on September 9th will be kind of about establishing a process mining center of excellence. So some of the things that you should be thinking about from an organizational perspective to make this part of your continual improvement process. On the 23rd of September, we'll get the workforce optimization folks on to talk about the linkage between the two in a little bit more depth, because that is something that's new in Tokyo and is a little bit more involved. And then on the 7th of October, we'll focus in on kind of how to read and interpret those interconnected process maps. There's lots of other great academies out there for things like performance analytics, virtual agent, the platform in general, and the mobile academy. I encourage you to go check out all of those. And then last chance for questions, comments, thoughts about today's content or any content before we wrap up for the day.
Yeah, Dan, I had just asked whether or not there was going to be a micro cert created for this.
If you go through on the Now Learning site and you take the course, you get a certification, or you get like a, hey, I passed the course, and you can put it on your profile. I have to look into what the official process to get a micro cert is beyond that. I know we have them for things like virtual agent, performance analytics. I just haven't investigated what needs to happen to create one of those.
Thanks.
Yeah, but I think it's likely to happen, Philip, because we plan to put out the next version of the learning, self-learning, because think of this as a fundamental, the 101, and then we'll have a 201 and 301. So I think at that time, it probably makes sense to have a more of a micro cert or a cert.
Yeah, it just helps partner portfolios.
Right.
Anyone else? Well, if not, Manjeet, I thank you for helping out today, answering some questions for us and joining. Jay, as always, I appreciate your support. Trisha, I appreciate your support. And for all of you that continue to come back and join, thank you again for your time. And I hope to see and hear from you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Tim.
Take care,
All
everyone.
right. Thanks, everyone.